Mid-air chaos. Drunken passenger sparks violent brawl on EasyJet flight, forcing emergency diversion. A routine holiday flight turned into a scene of panic and chaos after a drunken altercation erupted on board an EasyJet flight traveling from London Gatwick Airport to Antalya. Now we take a deeper look and break down this entire story on the AI
I
podcast.
want you to imagine something. You're packing for a relaxing vacation, right?
Always a good feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And you get on the plane, you settle in, maybe take a little in-flight nap. You are fully expecting to wake up, look out the window, and see the sunny resorts of Turkey.
Right, the dream scenario.
But instead, you groggily open your eyes, you look out that reinforced glass, and you realize you are surrounded by local police on a tarmac in Kosovo.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a terrifying way to wake up.
It really is. And all because the person sitting, just a few rows ahead of you couldn't handle their vodka.
It's wild.
It is. So today, welcome to the deep dive. We are unpacking the anatomy of a single disastrous budget airline flight. We've got this fascinating excerpt from a source called The Cost of Chaos, and it really exposes this terrifying collision between duty-free alcohol, the intense physics of commercial aviation, and honestly, a modern social contract that is just hanging by a thread.
Yeah, hanging by a very thin thread.
Yeah.
It's a situation that forces us to look way past those, viral videos we constantly see online.
Right, the shaky cell phone footage.
Exactly. We have to examine the hidden mechanisms of air travel here.
Yeah.
Because we are looking at a scenario that basically hijacked an incredibly complex international logistical system. And it all started with something as simple as one passenger just refusing to follow the basic rules of human proximity.
Okay, let's unpack this because flying used to have this glamorous reputation. But reading this source, it sometimes feels like you're trapped in a flying pub at closing time, just thousands of feet in the air.
That's a painfully accurate description, honestly.
Right. So let's get right into the inciting incident on this EasyJet flight. It departed from London Gatwick, headed for Antalya, but somewhere over Europe, the atmosphere just completely degrades.
Rapidly.
Yeah, super rapidly. We have this British woman who essentially turns the cabin into a localized war zone. And eyewitnesses reported she wasn't just having like a discreet drink to calm her flight nerves. She was openly swigging vodka directly from a full-size bottle she brought with her.
Which is an immediate, highly visible signal to everyone around her. I mean, when you pull out a full bottle of liquor and just drink it straight in a confined public space, you are essentially announcing that you are opting out of the shared social contract.
You're like, rules do not apply to me.
Exactly. You are broadcasting unpredictability to the entire room, or in this case, the cabin.
And that unpredictability, it escalates violently. She starts aggressively confronting another passenger. There's video footage capturing her suddenly lunging across the aisle, swearing, and physically trying to strike someone.
It's just so chaotic.
It really is. And then there's this detail that just makes you recoil even thinking about it.
Yeah.
She actually spat directly in another traveler's face.
Yeah, that specific act, the spitting, is what shifts the event from just a loud nuisance to a profound biological and psychological violation.
Violation, yeah.
Because in behavioral psychology, spitting is universally recognized as one of the most primal displays of contempt.
It's so visceral.
It really is. It triggers an immediate disgust response in bystanders, which, rapidly accelerates the fight or flight mechanism for literally everyone trapped in that vicinity.
And trapped is the key word there. Because the cabin crew does try to intervene, but instead of de-escalating, two male passengers decide to jump into the fray.
Right, making it so much worse.
Exactly. So within minutes, this morphs from one unruly passenger into a chaotic group brawl, happening literally inches away from families and young children. And I want to look at the why here. Obviously, people get drunk and belligerent in bars all the time, but the reaction on a plane feels uniquely explosive. Why does this specific environment degrade so rapidly?
Well, it really comes down to a concept called proxemics.
Proxemics.
Yeah, it's the study of how humans use space and how that space affects our behavior.
Yeah.
So generally, humans have this invisible 18-inch intimate space bubble around them.
Okay, 18 inches.
Right. And we reserve that space strictly for close friends and family. But a commercial airplane cabin is one of the only places in modern society where we are forced to routinely surrender that intimate space to complete strangers for hours at a time.
Right. I mean, you're literally fighting a total stranger for 2 inches of plastic on a shared armrest. You are physically touching someone you do not know.
Precisely. And we only tolerate that extreme spatial violation because of a heavily enforced social illusion.
Oh, I like that. A social illusion.
Yeah, think about it. We all sit facing forward, we put our headphones on, maybe we read a book, and we just pretend we aren't hurtling through the stratosphere in a pressurized metal tube.
We just collectively agree to ignore the reality.
Right. But your brain still subconsciously knows you are trapped. There is literally no exit. So when someone shatters that illusion by lunging and spitting, it doesn't just annoy people, it breaches their core safety perimeter.
That makes so much sense.
Because in a park or a restaurant, if a fight breaks out, the psychological pressure valve is the exit door.
You just leave.
Exactly. You gather your kids and you walk away. On an airplane, the absence of an exit completely removes your physical agency. It turns every single passenger into an involuntary participant in a shared trauma.
Man, that lack of physical agency brings up a massive shift in how passengers are reacting to these moments today. Because looking at the bystander accounts from this flight in the source, one witness described the ordeal as absolutely mental, noting that the aggression came completely out of nowhere.
Just zero warning.
Right. But their immediate response wasn't to physically intervene or yell for help. Their response was to pull out their phone and start filming.
Which we see all the time now.
All the time. And they claimed it was for safety and documentation purposes. Now, I have to challenge that a bit, because here's where it gets really interesting to me. How does holding up a little glass rectangle protect you from a flying fist? Is filming really a safety measure?
Well, it's not physical safety, obviously, but it provides crucial psychological safety.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, think about the concept of paralysis we just mentioned. The cabin crew is overwhelmed. Physical intervention is highly dangerous, especially with unpredictable, intoxicated people in a cramped aisle.
Right, you don't want to get punched yourself.
Exactly. So the bystander is stripped of their ability to fight or flee. In that moment of utter helplessness, pulling out a phone actually serves as a vital tool to regain cognitive control.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like they're using the screen as a literal shield.
A psychological shield, yes. By placing a camera lens between themselves and the violence, the bystander creates an artificial distance. It frames the chaos.
It puts it in a box.
Right. It transforms them from a helpless victim into an active observer. It gives them a task, which helps regulate their own surging adrenaline. But beyond the immediate mental comfort, their claim of documentation reveals a very modern understanding of accountability.
Because there's no bouncer to kick them out. You just have to survive the flight and hope there are consequences later.
Exactly. When a situation is spiraling, creating an objective video record of a terrifying, highly subjective experience is really the only way to guarantee accountability once the aircraft is back on the ground.
Right, so they can't just deny it.
Yeah, it ensures that when the police eventually boarded, the incident isn't just dismissed as a minor, he said, she said scuffle. The violence is locked in as a verifiable fact.
Well, let's talk about those police boarding, because the intensely personal chaos inside that cabin didn't just stay there. It triggered a massive international reaction on the outside.
It really did.
Like we said at the start, this flight didn't make it to Turkey. The pilot was forced to divert a staggering 650 miles off their intended route, ultimately landing at Pristina International Airport in Kosovo.
Just a massive detour.
Yeah, and local police boarded the plane. They escorted a man in green and the woman in pink off the aircraft, and the flight eventually landed in Antalya 3 hours late. Now, I assume a diversion is complicated, but part of me just thinks they radio down to the nearest tower, point the nose down, and land.
Oh, if only it were that easy.
Right. But considering they ended up in Kosovo, there's clearly a lot more going on behind the cockpit door than just pulling over.
Oh, absolutely. A 650-mile diversion is a logistical earthquake. It is absolutely not as simple as taking a different exit off a highway.
So what's actually happening up there?
Well, when a pilot makes the decision to divert for an unruly passenger, they are often flying a heavy aircraft loaded with enough fuel to reach a much further destination. And many commercial jets have a maximum landing weight that is significantly lower than their maximum takeoff weight.
Wait, really? So the plane is literally too heavy to land safely because they haven't burned off the fuel they expected to use by the time they reach Turkey?
In many cases, yes, exactly. The pilot might have to calculate complex performance metrics on the fly, and in some situations perform fuel dumping procedures over designated areas, or brain off fuel in holding patterns.
Just flying in circles. Yeah, just to avoid structural damage to the landing gear upon touching down. And meanwhile, they are communicating with air traffic control, squawking an emergency code to clear the airspace around them.
And they are entering airspace they weren't scheduled to be in at all. They're crossing international borders unexpectedly.
That's the bureaucratic nightmare part of it. They have to negotiate entry with foreign air traffic control centers who completely weren't expecting them, coordinate with a totally different airport to ensure a runway is clear, and alert local authorities like the Kosovo police to have a tactical response ready on the tarmac the second those cabin doors open.
That is wild.
You are forcing the local immigration and customs infrastructure of a sovereign nation to suddenly process an emergency mid-air crime.
And all of that takes time. The text notes they arrived 3 hours behind schedule. But knowing how airlines operate, that 3-hour delay doesn't just vanish when they finally get to Turkey, right? It's not just an inconvenience for the people on that specific plane.
Oh no. Think of the global aviation network like a highly synchronized train switching yard. If one train stops unexpectedly on the main track, everything backs up.
The domino effect.
Precisely. That specific EasyJet aircraft was scheduled to land in Antalya, deplane, board a new group of vacationers, and fly somewhere else. Because it's 3 hours late, that subsequent flight is delayed.
Right.
And it gets worse. The crew operating the aircraft are governed by strict, legally mandated duty hour limits to prevent fatigue. A massive delay like this might cause the pilot or flight attendants to time out.
Meaning it becomes literally illegal for them to fly the plane any further.
Exactly. So now the airline has to scramble to find a standby crew, potentially flying them in from another hub entirely. The financial ramifications are staggering.
I can't even imagine the cost.
The airline has to pay for the extra aviation fuel burned during the diversion, the unplanned landing and parking fees at Pristina Airport, the potential compensation claims for passengers who miss connections, and the wave of cancellations across their network.
Right.
You are looking at a multi-million-dollar chain reaction. And it is all triggered by one person's inability to control their alcohol consumption.
Which brings us to the industry's breaking point. Because airlines are just hemorrhaging money over these incidents and passengers are increasingly terrified. So the aviation industry is scrambling for a fix. Following this incident, EasyJet publicly reiterated a strict zero-tolerance policy.
Right.
But the conversation goes much wider than one airline. Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary has pointed out the sharp increase in these mid-air disruptions, and he ties them directly to excessive drinking. And his proposed solution is pretty draconian. He wants airports to enforce a strict maximum of 2 drinks per passenger.
2 drinks total.
Yeah. And Ryanair has also already banned passengers from bringing their own alcohol on board. But I have to say, the 2-drink maximum sounds like a great aggressive headline. It sounds like a CEO really taking charge. But logistically, it feels impossible to police.
It's incredibly difficult.
Right. Airports are no longer just waiting rooms with rows of plastic chairs. They are sprawling, optimized shopping malls designed specifically to extract money from a captive audience who has hours to kill.
Absolutely.
So are we really expecting a bartender at a busy airport pub to scan a boarding pass and run a background check on someone's drink count? Like, how do they know I didn't just have 2 beers at the sports bar in Terminal A and now I'm ordering a...
O'Leary's proposal really highlights a fascinating commercial paradox at the heart of modern air travel. It forces us to ask, where does the responsibility actually lie? And are the financial incentives of the industry fundamentally at odds with safety?
Okay, break that down for us. What are the actual economics happening at the airport?
Let's elevate this and look at the real estate. Airports generate revenue in 2 main ways. There's aeronautical revenue, which is what they charge airlines for landing fees and gate use. And then there's non-aeronautical revenue.
Which is everything else.
Right. That non-aeronautical revenue is parking, retail, duty-free shops, and bars.
So the airports need the bars to make money.
They don't just need them, they heavily rely on them. By leasing highly lucrative space to bars and duty-free liquor stores, airports generate massive profits.
Okay.
And those profits allow them to keep the aeronautical landing fees lower to attract airlines like EasyJet and Ryanair in the first place. So the airlines themselves indirectly benefit from the alcohol sales on the ground because it keeps their own operational costs down.
Oh, wow. So the airlines are furious about the behavior, but they are directly benefiting from the commercial ecosystem that fuels it.
Exactly.
That is an incredible paradox. You are essentially sending passengers wildly mixed signals. I mean, the airport environment encourages you to relax, spend money, start your vacation early, go hit the duty-free aisle.
Have a pint before your flight.
Yeah. But the second you step onto the jet bridge, the airline demands you flip a switch and become a perfectly compliant, sober citizen of a highly regulated skytube.
And that is exactly why O'Leary's suggestion, while totally understandable from a safety perspective, faces such immense resistance from airport operators. If you cap drinks at 2 per passenger, you drastically cut into the airport's non-aeronautical revenue.
And they won't stand for that.
No. If the airport loses that money, they have to raise landing fees to compensate, which means the budget airlines suddenly face higher operating costs, which invariably leads to higher ticket prices for the consumer. It is an incredibly entangled economic web.
So fixing the brawls might actually mean the end of the ultra-cheap budget ticket as we know it.
It's very possible.
That is a fascinating angle. It really is a massive mess, you know, a logistical, financial, and psychological mess, and it all stems from that single breach of personal space in the cabin.
It's amazing how one action ripples out like that.
It really is. We've taken you on quite a journey today, starting from a localized disruption over an armrest, exploring the psychology of bystander paralysis, mapping out the multi-million-dollar fallout of an emergency diversion to Kosovo, and finally unpacking the hidden real estate economics of your local airport terminal. It's a lot of interconnected machinery.
That's a fragile system.
Truly. But I guarantee the next time you are heading out on vacation and you walk past one of those bustling airport bars on the way to your gate, you are going to view that pint of beer and the whole system around it in a completely different light.
It definitely changes the perspective on what it takes to keep the aviation network functioning safely. But before we finish up, there's one final lingering question this whole scenario leaves us with.
Oh, what's that?
It's something for you to explore on your own. We discussed Ryanair's policy banning passengers from bringing their own alcohol on board. Yet the inciting incident on that EasyJet flight involved a woman openly swiging vodka directly from a bottle she had clearly carried onto the plane with her.
Right, she completely bypassed whatever rules were already in place.
Which raises a critical dilemma. If passengers are already finding ways to circumvent current regulations, smuggling full bottles of liquor onto planes right under the noses of gate agents and security, will a 2-drink limit at the airport bar actually solve this mid-air epidemic?
That's a good point.
Or, by restricting access so heavily, do we risk forcing the consumption underground? If passengers start secretly binge drinking in bathroom stalls before boarding, or bringing disguised alcohol in their carry-ons, it becomes practically impossible for flight crews to assess who is actually an intoxication risk before those cabin doors close.
Wow, that is a genuinely unnerving thought, just pushing the problem into the shadows where you can't prepare for it at all.
Exactly.
Something to really think about next time you buckle in. Because you might just be packing for a relaxing beach getaway, but once you're in the air, that complex social contract is only as strong as the person sitting in the row next to you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. Should airlines like EasyJet introduce stricter in-flight alcohol policies to prevent situations like this, or would that unfairly impact responsible passengers? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.